We are reviewing today Deathbird Stories by Harlan Ellison, one of the most prolific short story collections of all time. It is so good, I accidentally ripped off the cover this morning. But Harlan Ellison is a weird jerk. His character as a human being is questionable, but his writing as a science fiction author is really good, especially when you think about that these were written from 1960 to around 1975. And the concept of this book and of this anthology of short stories is the new gods, the gods of today. And what do I mean by that? Well, for instance, have you ever read the book American Gods, the famous novel by Neil Gaiman, or seen the TV show on Stars? That book and show was inspired by Deathbird Stories. And the concept of American Gods is that there are these gods who are incarnate in reality, but they cease to exist when the belief in them stops. For instance, if we think of the millions and millions of deities that have been worshipped, if no one still worships or knows about them or gives them any energy, can they really exist? And this is following from an axiomatic spiritual concept that our thoughts have some magical nature to them. And you don't even have to believe this, but it makes for a great short story collection. For instance, the first story, and what's really cool about this collection is that they really get better as you go, and the last two are really best in the collection, but the first one's also a banger. And the story starts off, and I'm just going to give a spoiler for the first one because you've probably never read this before, or if you have, you want to hear about my opinion. It's called The Whimper of Whipped Dogs, and it's about this girl. She lives in New York City. She's from upstate somewhere, and she's a dance choreographer. Then one night, she sees some girl out in their courtyard, I'm sure of their apartment complex, being stabbed to death by this man, and everyone is watching from their windows, and no one does anything. This is actually based off of a true story. This happens all the time. You see a car crash, and everyone just keeps driving by. I remember one time I was in a car with some people. I was driving down to the Florida Keys, and out of nowhere, some dude just came out and hit the car right in front of us, just ran a red light, and boom. And I'm trying to get out of the car. The door's locked. I'm like, oh my God, we got to help these people. And then the people I was with, they were like, oh no, we got to get down to Key West, and we have a dinner reservation. I was like, oh my God, someone might be hurt. I'm a first responder. I'm not a first responder, but I am the first on the scene right now. But this girl then psychologically starts to affect her, and she starts to realize that there is a god of the city in the inner city of New York. There are different rules. There are different gods. And one night she gets apprehended. Her house gets broken into, and she gets dragged into the courtyard and is about to get stabbed. And then she calls for this god. She calls for the god of the city. Because if you think about it, what are people doing when they live in a city like LA, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, wherever? There is a belief in the city at some level. Just like out in the country, there are spirits. There is a mythology to the city, but there might be tens of millions of people believing in that. So she calls to the god of the city, and this creature comes and mangles the man, and then it ends with her saying, I'll never be screwed with again. But it's stuff like this. There's, for instance, the gods of the highway, the gods of factories, the gods of our reality, and heaven and hell, and all the new remix versions. How many different versions of Jesus exist? There are thousands of different translations of the Bible. There's Black Jesus, Mexican Jesus, Mormon Jesus, Catholic Jesus, every single version you can imagine. And in this reality, they all can manifest. And Harlan Ellison is an absolute craftsman because he has that edge. He has that grit. He's a really good writer who's very well nuanced and practiced and has the talent to back up all the skill. But he isn't afraid to be a little bit weird. He, I would say, is a misogynist. He for sure was one in his real life, and then in the story that comes through. But at some level, if you are going to be dealing with flawed people in these crazy scenarios, there are a lot of men in the world, at least a couple out of 10, who are disrespectful toward women at a core level. So if you want an accurate depiction of what's happening in reality, that's where we're at. That's where humanity's consciousness is at. And he's not afraid to go there. There are, trigger warning, rape scenes and other things that happen throughout this text that not graphic or anything crazy, but he pushes the limits. He doesn't care. He confronts culture instead of shying away from it. And that's something that we don't have a lot of today. And unfortunately, when you have a person like Harlan Ellison, he would attack people. For instance, his creative writing professor when he was at university said he would never be crap, so he went and attacked the professor and then sent him every single book he ever published. He attacked people at award shows. I think he groped a woman at an award show. So it's like, okay, this is obviously not acceptable at any level, but I'm not here for the medium. I'm here for the tale. And another thing that Harlan Ellison has done, other than inspiring so many people, he was good friends with Robin Williams, for example. He helped build the careers or help promote Ursula K. Le Guin, J.G. Ballard, Octavia Butler. And without him, who knows? I mean, I'm sure they would have done fine anyway, but there's, I'm just saying, if you dive in the Harlan Ellison world like I have, and start reading his books, you start to question who he is at a core level. But these stories in this collection is where I would start with Harlan Ellison, who is one of the most prolific short story authors of all time. I can give nothing but, there are a couple short stories in here, I would say 2 or 3, or 2 to 4 depending on your taste or preferences, that aren't that great, that aren't the best. But anytime you read a short story collection, it's so wide ranging, and there's going to be duds, especially in the 70s. There are going to be some duds, but overall, this is in my top 10 for short story collections. I've read hundreds. I spent years at university just pouring through short stories, reading every single journal or magazine I could. And he writes better than most modern authors, for sure, who are getting published in journals. He has the grit, the writing, and the pace, and the imagination to do much better than all the navel gazing. So much navel gazing is happening now. People just trying to get in little minute circles about family or New York City, or but my experience is this type of person. And it's like, okay, so what? That's cool, but you need to go bigger than that, and then we can get what you're navel gazing as a part of it. If you want to self-flaunt or be a narcissist, that's great, but make that just a part of the story, not the whole story. Anyway, if you guys would like to check out some other short story collections that I've talked about, check out those videos right there. Peace.